Soccer Talk podcast, the only podcast that focuses on watching soccer on TV, online, and apps. Coming up on this week's show, what the ESPN Plus Bundesliga deal means for soccer viewers, NBC takes an enormous leap forward in the soccer wars, how the Bundesliga went after the money instead of what is best for soccer fans, MLS sink to new lows with their TV ratings, plus letters from you, the listeners, in our mailbag section. My name is Christopher Harris, and I am joined by my co-host, Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, we've got a lot to get to in this episode. Some big news that was officially announced this week about the Bundesliga and ESPN Plus. We'll get into that in the news segment. Some interesting takes on that one. But first of all, in terms of what we've been watching this past week, I think both you and I have watched a ton of soccer. The one match that stood out for me in terms of my favourites, I'm not sure if it was yours, but was the Copa Libertadores semi-final first leg, River Plate against Boca Juniors from Stadio Monumental. And this one, to me, it felt like a cup final. It was just really physical, fast-paced, direct style of football. It's almost kind of going back to the 80s style in terms of England, but very enticing and very appealing to watch. And the atmosphere was incredible, and River Plate was on fire. They really dominated this match. What was your take on in terms of the match and the coverage of it?
So, yeah, River Boca, I think, best match of the week. I mean, if I have to pick something different, I would pick Paderborn and Bayern, which was on FS1. We'll get to that match in a minute. Back to River Boca. Great wraparound coverage from BN. I'll admit, I probably am watching less La Liga than I have for many years, and am not interacting with BN very much. So them having Copa Libertadores, and particularly at River Boca, right? That's enticing. Whatever the competition, whatever the time of year, whatever the night of the week. It hooked me into BN on Tuesday night, and watched it, enjoyed it. I actually didn't watch it all Tuesday night. I watched a lot of it on Wednesday night, which also, I will admit, I didn't watch a second of UEFA Champions League this week. Was at work, opted to watch championship games live on my laptop at work while I was working, and then also had some calls that took me away. And then both nights, when I would have been watching the DVRs of Champions League, I was watching either parts of this match live or parts of this match and the coverage on DVR. BN is in Miami. They're based in Miami. So Fernando Fiore, who lives in South Florida, bringing him in on the Spanish language side, I thought was interesting. This gives him a chance maybe to be if his reputation has been changed or his image has been changed by his work at Fox, a chance to kind of reconnect with a core audience that he used to connect with weekly when he hosted a showdown here. And that was interesting. Again, showing his expertise on Argentine football and on football in Buenos Aires. I like the coverage. BN doing big events, big soccer events, from a pure coverage standpoint. And we're going to jump around a little bit on this podcast about coverage versus accessibility, because when we talk about the Bundesliga, I think I want to make it clear that when I say that when I talk about Fox, I'm talking also about accessibility, not just how they cover the matches, because there seems to be an obsession with how Fox covers the matches, and I fed into that obsession for years. But I really like what BN does on these big events, and this was great. This is a special derby anyway, but they took it to another level on American television, I think, on Tuesday night.
And the thing about this, though, too, Kartik, is that if you had to basically kind of pick one commentator or co-commentator to co-commentate the game, Ray Hudson, of all people. I mean, this is somebody who, for decades, has been in love with Argentine football, and also, a big fan of, the Boca Juniors, River Plate. All these clubs, and you could hear the passion and excitement in his voice, and I thought Phil Shane did a great job. And then on the other side too, on the flip side too, if you were a Spanish speaker, you had the beIN Sports and Espanol, kind of the more frenetic, the more even more passionate calls to the game. I was surprised though, the Fernando Fiore. I had heard zero, not one bit of news about Fernando Fiore being involved in the Spanish language broadcast and that. So I was taken aback by that. I thought it was a good move to bring him in. He's somebody that I believe. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe knows the game, is very intelligent. But whenever he's been on Fox, he's played the clown. He's been dumbed down, and he does know this stuff. And when he does get more serious, he shows his stuff.
Let me ask you a question, Chris, about beIN relative to the general football world. I thought they were fantastic. I thought they were magnificent having Ray as the co-commentator. I glossed over that part because it just seems so natural, him doing an Argentine match because of his love for Argentine football. But is it difficult now where beIN is the place they are in the general broadcast landscape? Is this something where if CONMEBOL had made an agreement with TUDN, which seems to be becoming more and more prominent in terms of soccer viewing in this country, it would have been a huge event, whereas it just kind of took a back page in terms of American soccer fandom because it was on beIN. Is that a problem going forward? I
think so. I mean, on Tuesday night and Wednesday night, and probably a lot of listeners too that are listening right now to the podcast, I couldn't get a sense for how. Actually, I could get a sense. There seemed to be very little interest among English language speakers to this game for the most part. Most of the people I follow, on social media, didn't seem to be talking about this game. Actually, what they were talking about was the Diego Maradona documentary, which was one of the advertisers, so pre-match, halftime, and post-match during the River Plate game against Boca Juniors. And that broadcast of that documentary, which I will watch, I didn't watch it because I was watching this game, that started at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 30 minutes after this game had kicked off. So I think a lot of the English language people were probably focused on watching that and not this game. And that's the thing, if it was on TUDN, absolutely would have had much greater impact in terms of reach and viewership. And I think probably too would have probably done more promotion and advertising. beIN Sports did do some advertising on this one, more so than they've done on previous big games. But at the end of the day, it's accessibility and its distribution, and TUDN's numbers are much, much bigger than what beIN Sports are. But yeah, so I think in some ways that in terms of CONMEBOL, that took the gloss off this game a little bit, just because there's less people speaking about it. Now, the second leg is really kind of where the fireworks for both this match and the Gremio Flamengo game will ignite, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more people interested in the second leg. But yeah, you're right. I think this is hopefully more people will pay attention to it, and of course with beIN Sports the excuse really is that it's not available. I can't get it. And the reality is, as we've talked about before, is that if you do want to watch beIN Sports, it's more accessible than most of the other channels if you want to stream. If you're okay with streaming, then it's more accessible than anything else out there. Now, Kartik, Champions League you did miss. What I will say with the Champions...
I did watch... I should mention, though, I watched BR Live's post-match. I did watch those DVR'd both days, so I have a sense of what happened, obviously.
Well, let me start with that then. So on Tuesday, I watched BR football post-match, and this was probably some of the worst television I've seen in a long, long time. I don't know who had the dumb idea of saying, okay, all right, post-match, we're going to have Steve Nash in a bar, in a Spurs bar in California, and... after that, thrashing, it felt like a funeral. That you were, Steve Nash, obviously being a Spurs fan, was, dejected, was definitely down. And the idea, why not broadcast something where you're going live to a soccer bar somewhere in Southern California, where you have Bayern fans and you have Spurs fans. So it's more 50-50, and the Bayern fans would be celebrating, the Spurs fans would be, of course, disappointed with the result. But the other thing too about this, like about 1 or 2 seconds before Steve Nash started speaking, the producer in that bar, you could hear him telling the actual Spurs fans, shh, 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 like be quiet. And so all the Spurs fans were kind of standing right behind him, couldn't utter a single word. It was like watching a silent movie, and then Steve Nash just talking about how disappointed and dejected he was, and that rubbed off too on the studio analysis too, because post match with Stu Holden and Kate Abdo, it was as if Spurs had lost a cup final. While if you're a Bayern Munich fan and you're watching this broadcast, you're like, hey, shouldn't there be some more excitement about this? How great Bayern Munich was. So to me, Turner. Actually, I'll be honest with you, Kartik. I think I've decided not to watch Turner for the rest of the Champions League. Reason being is I'm watching the Whip Around channel on Tudorene Extra, which is called Zona Football. And this is exactly like Multi-Match 90. And what it does is it goes ahead and gives you a Spanish language broadcast of a main feed of the Champions League. So whatever the big game is, maybe it's Inter against Barcelona. Anytime a goal happens or anytime a key incident happens, it changes and shows you that incident, and it comes back to that match or goes between all the different matches. And for me in the group stage, this is exactly what I want. I love Multi-Match 90. I love the MLS whip around shows that NBC have done in the past and ESPN have done in the past. And on the English language side, BR Live and TNT does not have this available, but Zona Football on Champions League and now the challenge is trying to find broadcasters that actually have a partnership with Tudorene that make it available. For me personally, with Fubo, I can log in with my Fubo credentials and then watch Zona Football from Tudorene.com.
Yeah. So that's what I was about to say. My office mates, several of them, people who work in my office this week, logged into Fubo and were stunned on Tuesday that there was this channel. And kept it on. So part of the reason I didn't have to watch Champions League and I could watch ESPN Plus coverage of the EFL of the championship was because everyone else in my office was watching this multi-match or this Zona Football, and we're giving constant score updates. So and I think that's now, for at least for people who have Fubo, which is a lot of people I know, going to be the default channel for Champions League, not Turner anymore, not TNT anymore. So, and as far as people subscribing to BR Live, forget it. I mean, they have access to the games anyway, right? Maybe some people are bothered by Spanish language commentary. I know there are. Yeah. When I've told people, hey, just watch Univision, when someone texted me yesterday complaining that the Chelsea game wasn't on Turner, and that they had signed up for BR Live, but there were some snafus. I said, just watch it on Univision. Just watch it in the Univision app, and they're like, it'll be in Spanish. Just mute the television then. I don't know. Mute your computer. The guy was at work, so mute your computer. I don't know. I mean, you do not have to be, if you feel like you're being held hostage by Turner and BR Live, you don't have to be in that position.
Yeah. And I can see some people wanting to have the English language broadcast and then saying, okay, I'd rather stick with BR Live and then hear the commentary, or the Gary Birtles or whoever's doing the co-commentary and get their analysis. And I can see that, especially for those who don't speak or understand Spanish. But the two things about Zona Football which are amazing are, one is in the background, anytime a goal is scored, there's a chime. So it's kind of like dee 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 dee, or whatever sound it is, like a bell sound. So if you have it on in the background and maybe you're at work or maybe you're watching another game and you hear that chime, you know to turn your attention back to the Zona Football and you'll see that goal within the next few seconds. The other thing too about this too is that halftime, actually pre-match, halftime and post-match, there are 0 commercials. There's no commercials at all. So halftime for the Champions League, you're getting recaps and all the goals from all the different games and all the highlights. So maybe you missed something, or maybe you went to the bathroom or something like that, and you come back at halftime, you can catch up on everything you've missed. I love it. I think it's really fantastic, and it's definitely something that's. I mean, for me, it's great too, because even the Valencia Ajax game, or even the Liverpool Salzburg game, that is a game 3-0 ahead. I would have switched the channel. I would have gone on to something else and watched some, one of the other games. But with the Zone of Football, the Salzburg comeback, I was able to see that basically live, like goals flying in. The Valencia-Ajax game, the first goal from Ajax, absolutely incredible goal. I was able to see that. I was able to see things that normally I wouldn't see because I would have been fixated on one channel, watching that game and trying to enjoy it, but thinking like, I'm missing out. So we'll have more details in the coming days about To Do Any Extra and Zone of Football and how you can get it and what the links are and things like that. But I was really, really impressed. And again, with the TNT analysis and coverage that I saw, it's become very boring. It's become very predictable. It's the same talking heads, just talking. I mean, it'd be great to have, I don't know, Jurgen Klinsmann or somebody, some star power to come in onto the set to give some more.
Klinsmann actually would have been perfect for Bayern versus
oh my gosh,
Spurs. I mean, that's actually a good shout because
better than Steve Nash in the funeral there, even
right. And then I know a lot of people get angry about this, maybe I don't think you'll disagree with me, Chris, but a lot of our listeners will because they're very Premier League centric. I think Turner now has gone in a direction where they're also very Premier League centric, even though they don't cover that league, right? Yeah. So you mentioned the lack of analysis of Bayern in the postgame, which I noticed. I mean, they did talk about Thiago's over-the-top looping ball to Gnabry and the beauty of that, but beyond that, it was all about Spurs. I think that's in general. I mean, even yesterday with Jesse Marsh, an American coach who anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that I said for the U.S. national team job there should be one candidate. This was a year and a half ago, and it was him, right? Yeah. And I feel really vindicated by how well he's doing in Europe. In that, not that I'm not supporting Berhalter now that he's the choice, but I'm a huge Jesse Marsh, a huge believer in him, not just a fan, but a believer in him. That was the back seat to talking about Liverpool, which I get. But again, I think they've gone very Premier League focused. Maybe it's also because they're using London-based commentators, the international feed, and they're very Premier League focused. But I think that's bled into their coverage now, where the focus is. And again, the first year they had European football, all 4 finalists in both competitions were from England. But I think it's bled into their pregame and postgame shows, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. It's a very anglicized broadcast, which might be smart in terms of who's actually going to watch the English language feed or English language coverage of the Champions League. But it's also, I think, a disservice to the tournament as a whole. Yeah, especially when it's the Bundesliga and you've got teams like Bayern Munich that did really well. And you have a lot of German teams in the competition, and then you've got Stu Holden, who covers the Bundesliga from time to time for Fox Sports, so he's got a lot of knowledge of that league too. And what you said, Kartik, is perfectly correct, is that probably TNT is looking at this going, okay, all right, well, we've got the Spanish language audience that they will gravitate to Univision and To Do Any, and we've got the English language broadcast side of things. And the greatest number of viewers that are watching soccer are gravitating towards the Premier League, so let's have that be a focal point. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that to a certain extent, but there's so many other great talking points to cover and dive into. They're missing out on that. So in terms of this past week, Kartik, saw a ton of soccer, everything. I mean, actually, the Man United Rochdale game last week in the League Cup was fantastic. I really enjoyed that one. Watched a bunch of Serie A. Can I make one quick point about Stu Holden?
Yeah.
I think also Stu Holden is exceedingly knowledgeable. He's kind of geeks out on, I think, football in general. Yeah. Maybe people don't like his style and they associate him with Fox and the U.S. national team, so they think he's an MLS a fanboy, which, I'm not going to get into that discussion, but he is really knowledgeable, more knowledgeable than the vast majority of people on American television, English or Spanish side, about the game in Europe. I don't know why Turner is not pushing his buttons better in terms of allowing him to talk about some of that stuff. But that's a whole nother discussion, right? I'm sure we're going to keep having the TNT discussion during these match days. Oh,
maybe not. Who knows? If we're all watching To Do Any and Zone of Football. But yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay, no worries. Yeah, so in terms of this past week, watched a ton of soccer, La Liga, Serie A, Championship, League Cup, so on and so forth. A lot of really. I enjoyed it. I mean, I love watching soccer anyway, so no problems there. One last thing before we head on to TV streaming news, Kartik. Anything else that stood out that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, just the Paderborn Bayern game, which was my favorite match of the week, other than Copa Libertadores. It was on FS1. We'll get more into the FS1 issue in the next segment in terms of the Bundesliga. Ian Joy has an expertise on American players, and particularly on this young man, Kiri Shelton, who made his Bundesliga debut coming on late for Paderborn. Great atmosphere, small ground, community club. I mean, atmospheres in Germany are just top-notch, as I think everybody knows. But this had a really special feel. Paderborn gets a lifeline, gets back into the match. Shelton comes on. Ian Joy's able to talk about that very with a great deal of education, because he commentates for New York City FC also, where Shelton previously played. And it was just I thought a really exciting and entertaining match. Bayern, maybe with an eye toward Tuesday in the Champions League, took their foot a bit off the gas, and Paderborn almost got a point. A newly promoted team, a team that's likely to go back down. Bayern, of course, midweek certainly showed that, if they had their foot off the gas on Saturday, there was a good reason for that, and they were full throttle ahead when they went to Spurs. But a great broadcast. I want to just mention Kiri Shelton's a player that was developed in large part by a man I work with, Paul Dalglish, the son of Kenny Dalglish, the brother of Kelly Cates, at the youth level here in the States. So it was really nice to see him make his full debut, or not full debut, he came off the bench, but his debut in a top European league. That's certainly something I know Coach Dalglish is very proud of, and everyone who's worked with the guy.
All right, so let's move on to TV streaming news. And Kartik, we got official confirmation on Monday of the deal between the Bundesliga and ESPN Plus, which will begin with the 2020-21 season, beginning in August 2020. This will be the final season of Fox Sports' coverage of the Bundesliga. They've had it for 5 years, but let me hand it over to you and to read a quote, which will be kind of interesting in terms of the Bundesliga's take on this announcement. Yeah,
this is interesting from Robert Klein, the chief executive of the Bundesliga, of Bundesliga International. You and I both got this press release in the wee hours Monday morning, so this is what we started our week with. Quote from Klein: "We have roughly the same number of games on the big network as we did under the Fox contract, but more importantly, we know the audience levels that we want to achieve, and we have thought carefully about how we go about that. There is a live game, a top global league product, but then when you are going to do outside of, what are you going to do outside of that? We want to be there 24/7. We want to bring the news stories. We want to bring the relevant stories. We're going to try a number of different things every year. Some will work, some won't, but we are confident that the U.S. fans are going to have a connection and access to a league like they've never had before. We need someone like ESPN who really gets that," unquote. My understanding, Chris, is, and I think you might be talking to some of the same sources I am, this is a lot about bumper programming, ancillary programming, highlight shows, magazine programming, and the fact that those things would be buried on FS2, be shown middle of the week. If it's on ESPN Plus and it's there all the time, there's potentially more access to that. That having been said, maybe we'll get into this. Maybe I'll turn it over to you. But there were a number of accessibility issues that Fox gave the Bundesliga that ESPN probably won't.
Yeah, and that's the part that I was going to chime in on, Kartik, is that to deconstruct this quote, I mean, the pull quote out of this is, US fans are going to have a connection and access to a league like they've never had before. The reality is that's not true. I mean, the reality is that whether you loved Fox's coverage of the Bundesliga or thought it was poor, whatever it may be, is that Fox gave the Bundesliga more access to soccer, to the Bundesliga soccer, than ESPN will. There's no doubt of that. I mean, especially when you have almost every single game for the Bundesliga on ESPN Plus, which is a streaming platform, which is, yes, it's only $5 a month, but that definitely, that's not every audience. And like, for example, just a couple of days ago, I was speaking to somebody at a retail store, and we were talking about soccer. He's not a big soccer fan, but he watches the Premier League, and he said that he's been following Sheffield United this season because that's kind of his underdog, but he's a Chelsea fan. And he said about the Bundesliga, he said, yeah, and I was flipping through, and I was watching, I think on Monday night, like a replay of the Paderborn against Bayern Munich game, and he was saying about how great the game was. And I said to him, I said, well, next season that's not going to happen. He's like, why? I said, well, those games will be on ESPN Plus. He's like, ESPN Plus, I don't stream. I watch everything on television. I watch FS1, I watch FS2, I watch NBC ESPN, etc., etc. He says, I'm not the type of person that's going to go ahead and sign up for a streaming service. And that's the reality of the situation, is that for those soccer fans or sports fans who do have ESPN Plus, this is fantastic news. This is another benefit and value add to what is already a very cost-effective subscription service. I mean, really, really cost-effective. But the reality is outside of that, mainstream America, for the most part, does not subscribe to ESPN Plus, even though ESPN Plus says we have 2 million subscribers. Okay, out of those 2 million subscribers, how many of them are watching Serie A week in, week out? And it might be 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. It's a small number. Nowhere is it anywhere near the 2 million number. So when the Bundesliga spins this and says US fans are going to have a connection and access to a league like they've never had before, that's not true. I mean, the connection, yes. The connection now in terms of what ESPN does, and also opportunities to talk about the Bundesliga on SportsCenter, or the opportunities for ESPN to talk about the Bundesliga on ESPN FC, or even some connections in terms of Disney Plus. I mean, when Disney Plus launches in November, maybe having a promo there to talk about, the Bundesliga and ESPN Plus. Be sure to sign up for the service so you can watch almost every game through the ESPN Plus service. And then at the end of the day, too, I mean, you look at Fox and what they've done in terms of broadcasting the Bundesliga. And while I've not been a big fan of it by any means, they did have a number of games on Big Fox, on the Big Fox network. And that channel is in more homes than ESPN and ESPN2. Yes, there's a potential possibility that ESPN could put a Bundesliga game on ABC, which would then be on the level of a Big Fox network. But that's unlikely. I mean, and then the reality is, under this contract that the ESPN has signed with the Bundesliga, the guarantee is for 4 games a season to be on television, which is worse than a Serie A deal. At least with a Serie A deal, almost weekly, Serie A has a game on television. So whether it's ESPN2, sometimes usually ESPN News, sometimes even ESPNU, but at least it's on television, and at least it's more accessible to mainstream sports fans. So it's a big announcement. It's a big deal, but I don't know. I think this is not a win-win for the Bundesliga. This is a win-win for ESPN Plus subscribers. But Kartik, I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, okay, I want to first off mention we are not talking about the way Fox covers the matches. We have hammered them for 5 seasons, or however long we've been doing this show, this version of the show. Obviously, we've been doing this show for over a decade, but the media version, since we started, we've been hammering the way Fox covers the Bundesliga. But the fact remains, they do air games on linear television. There are more games in a weekend on linear television in a single match day than ESPN apparently is going to air the entire season.
Yeah,
just get your head around that for a minute. This season, Fox has begun to air games on FS1 on Saturday mornings. Previously, they had college football programming on. They bumped that to Big Fox. They created a spot on a network with greater distribution for the Bundesliga this season, which made me think, maybe they're making a play to keep it. It surprised me because as they're losing the contract, they do that. But that Paderborn Bayern game match we talked about was on FS1 last season. Same exact match day. That sort of matchup would have been on FS2. So there has been incremental improvements. There's been incremental improvements in the studio programming. Yes, I get the idea of tying into the ESPN brand and production and the just gargantuan nature of ESPN. But I would have to say that ESPN FC program already covers the Bundesliga. If you wanted some honest coverage about Christian Pulisic's season last season at Borussia Dortmund, before he went to Chelsea and has to this point at Chelsea flopped badly, you could have gotten that analysis on ESPN FC because they were covering Borussia Dortmund last season, showing highlights, and saying Christian Pulisic came on in the 90th minute. He's not very effective. Why is Chelsea buying this player for this amount of money? So they've always covered the Bundesliga. Will there be more of a commitment to cover it now because they have the rights? Maybe, but they cover it. They cover the way ESPN FC, the show is structured now. They cover the Premier League as their primary focus, but then the other 4 European leagues, well, maybe not Liga, but the other 3, Bundesliga, Serie A, and La Liga, are generally covered at the same scope, even though they do not have rights to the Bundesliga and La Liga currently. So I don't know if them having the rights is going to change that. I'm excited by the fact that ESPN's brand is connected to the Bundesliga, because for those who don't know, I'm a massive Bundesliga fan, and it's not just because I like the style of football or quality of football in Germany. It's because my views as a football fan, a community-oriented, club-oriented football fan, is that the Bundesliga and German football in general is football as it was meant to be, football as it should be, because of the community ownership structure and membership structure of the vast majority of clubs in the German football pyramid. So it's my favorite league in that sense. But I don't know. We'll have to see, Chris. I guess I'm giving a lot of negativity today about this move, but maybe tying to the ESPN brand makes the Bundesliga, maybe not the games themselves, but all of the surrounding things, like what I just said, the understanding of community clubs and member-based clubs. This is why the Bundesliga is fundamentally different than the Premier League or the La Liga or Serie A. Maybe that's why the league isn't as competitive at the top, you could argue, but these sorts of stories that need to be told in the American media that could compel soccer fans to become Bundesliga fans. Maybe ESPN's a better storyteller and they have better mechanisms to tell that story. Mm-hmm. But I am not sure we're gonna see as much of these teams. And Borussia Dortmund has developed a following in this country the last few years. Bayern Munich has always had a following in this country. I think this might be, once again, like putting yourself on Goal TV to a certain extent. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's one of those things that this deal will take the Bundesliga off television. I mean, it will not make it accessible to the mainstream. And yes, you will have 4 games a season that will be on television, but that's it. I mean, it's a long season, and those 4 games will seem insignificant. At the end of the day, though, Kartik, this deal to me is not about the Bundesliga thinking about, making the league more accessible to soccer fans. This deal is strictly financial. And in the deal that Fox had with the Bundesliga, they were paying approximately between $7.5 million and $10 million a year for the rights to broadcast the Bundesliga in the United States through television and streaming. With the ESPN deal, it's $30 million a year. So it's 3 to 4 times as much money. And at the end of the day, I mean, whether you're the Bundesliga or whether you're, the Championship, or whether you're Eredivisie or Serie A, or potentially maybe the UEFA Champions League, or potentially maybe the Europa League, if somebody comes to you and offers 3 to 4 times the amount of money that you were getting before, you're going to probably take it. But at the end of the day, too, it hurts the distribution, it hurts the accessibility. But for ESPN, ESPN's paying a ton of money for the Bundesliga rights, and coupled with Serie A and everything else, they're making this the destination for soccer fans, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. And they're actually in the press this week, they've mentioned their interest in bidding on the UEFA Champions League, which will be coming up in the next year. So there's a potential here that they could gobble up everything. The only one that they've missed out on in terms of the rights is La Liga, within the past 1 to 2 years. And the only reason that they missed out on La Liga is because beIN Sports, La Liga did not open this up for bidding. La Liga did a global deal with beIN Sports, and that ensured that the beIN Sports would have the global rights to La Liga for the Spanish league. So at the end of the day, I think it's the Bundesliga making this play because of the financial impact, which they're a business at the end of the day, but that does not help soccer fans at all.
This also, I think, means in a year, it'll be a year, because we're 2 years out now from the contract being up. When the tender is extended by the Premier League for American broadcasters, I think there's a increasing likelihood that NBC just keeps it, and maybe they get another 6-year deal instead of a 3-year deal, because I think the Premier League will look at this and the exposure that they would get if they were to go to ESPN, and it's a non-starter for them. Now, Fox, if they wanted to shell out the money, I guess they could compete for it because now they have the open time slots. But still, it's this also makes it more likely the Premier League stays with NBC, which I think was probably likely anyway. Mm-hmm. But they're out of bandwidth, really, to show any more soccer, ESPN, given all of their contractual commitments to other sports and to college sports in particular, but then also to Major League Baseball and the NBA. I mean, they've just run out of bandwidth, and you can throw so much inventory on ESPN Plus, but I don't think that's necessarily attractive if you're looking at exposure. Now and accessibility. If you're looking just purely at a bottom line driven situation, that's different. I also have to say that ESPN, because they're spending so much money once again on rights, something I didn't think they'd be able to do given some of their difficulties in recent years, laying off staff, cutting back on certain productions, and also being tied into these 10 and 12-year deals with college around college sports, launching the ACC network, which they've just done, which is a whole nother conversation for another time. I didn't think they would have this sort of money free to be throwing money at the FA Cup, at IMG for the FA Cup and Serie A, at the Bundesliga, but they have, which is another element of the broadcast industry we're going to have to look at. And again, you have a situation where DAZN, a lot of fanfare, and I think they're doing okay with MMA and Bellator and things like that, but they've been shut out again. Yeah, and ESPN Plus and all the money that they're spending on those rights, which are huge amounts of money, and probably much greater than what the market can bear in terms of, they're just blowing the competition out of the water in terms of how much they're offering in this bidding. It's all because of Disney. It's all because of the long-term focus. The Disney money, but also the long-term focus on making ESPN Plus, kind of the ultimate sports streaming service, which even at this point is pretty close to being it. But imagine adding the Champions League to it, then it's a no-brainer for a lot of people, which would help the Bundesliga, but then there's still going to be a large portion of the United States in terms of the audience that are not going to subscribe to a service like that until maybe the NFL or into some other big sport, traditional American sport, was on there. But that's not going to happen anytime soon either. But the biggest winner, Kartik, in all of this news about the Bundesliga and the ESPN Plus and all the changes is NBC and the Premier League, because look at August 2020. The new season starts. Liverpool have been crowned champions. Haha. But anyway, but look at August 2020. On a typical weekend, the Premier League is going to have, and NBC is going to have no competition. On those times, those kickoff times when you used to have, a 7:30 kickoff or a 10 o'clock kickoff or 12:30 kickoff, the only really major competition that NBC would have been the Bundesliga, and especially if a game was a 12:30 game and it was on over-the-air Fox at the same time that a big game was on over-the-air NBC, that would be competition. But beginning August 2020, moving forward, NBC and the Premier League, the only competition it's going to have as far as club soccer at the same time as them is La Liga, which is on beIN Sports, which still in terms of distribution is nowhere near the level of NBCSN and that in terms of number of subscribers. So that's the big winner in this, is that if you thought the Premier League was big before, this is going to take it to a different level because there's no competition out there. People will tune in and watch more Premier League than they've done before. Now, Kartik, this one more news item before we move on to TV ratings, and that is that about a week ago, last Thursday, I believe it was, that Fox has removed FS1 and FS2 from Dish and Sling TV due to a carriage dispute. It's not good news for Major League Soccer or the Bundesliga. And as we're recording this, there's been no resolution yet. So if you do subscribe to Sling Blue or you have Dish, you're not able to get your FS1 and FS2, and hopefully that will be fixed soon. But in the meantime, I'm sure Fox and Dish and Sling will be in discussions trying to figure out if there's a way to reach a compromise. But that is not good news by any means. Now, moving on to TV ratings, Kartik, I'll have you lead off with the big news of the week. Yeah, the Super Classico, the America Chivas match, drew 2 million total viewers on Saturday. It was an America home match. Chivas is not on. Their home matches are not on as of now on U.S. television. That might change in the very near future, I understand. But this is the most watched soccer match of the year, club soccer match of the year, non-Women's World Cup or Copa America match of the year on any network, regardless of language. Monday's Arsenal-Man United game was the most watched weekday Premier League game since the Manchester Derby, which was a Wednesday match in April. Man United-Arsenal had a total audience delivery of 416,000 viewers across NBCSN for digital and digital for that game during a game that during office hours. That means it's beaten every Champions League broadcast, weekday Champions League broadcast this year as well, or since April, which is significant. Now, again, those two teams aren't what they were, and I think that people watch that match. Just thought it was a bad match of football, but a lot of people watch it.
Yeah, I actually, it's funny though, Kartik, because there was so much outcry, especially on Twitter, about that first half of that match, and I agree. The first half of that match was poor. You mean the skill level? I mean, technical skill was awful. The second half, though, I thought was much better, and actually that I was fine with the second half. But I think most of the comments, most of kind of the outcry was from the first half. And then people started retweeting that and kind of, making their own tweets that were in agreement with that first half. But overall, I thought it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be.
No, I would agree with that. I actually think we saw in the second half some signs that maybe Marcus Rashford, even though he didn't score a goal, can be a number 9. So that's not, yeah. I mean, this is a piece of football analysis, not broadcast analysis, but maybe that's something Manchester United fans can hang their hat on, because it's been awful thus far, and selling Lukaku without buying a replacement was a horrible mistake. But yeah, so still, there was enough interest in that match to sustain a pretty high number.
Yeah, and I was impressed by Arsenal's spirit in the second half, and I was positively impressed by what they did. So I think hopefully they'll go on and go far from there. Now, in terms of the bottom end of the scale in the TV ratings, oh gosh, okay. So actually, we know that the problems that beIN Sports has, which is that they're not on Comcast, they're not on DirecTV, they're not on the two biggest TV distributors in the United States. So they had the Madrid derby, Atleti against Real Madrid this past Saturday, and we only have the numbers on the English language side, and usually the Spanish language side is 2 to 3 times as many viewers. The English language side was 86,000 viewers, which is not that great either. We've had, I think that last week's was Granada against Barcelona, and I believe that was at least well over 100,000 people watched that game on the English language side. But then the other ones, in Kartik, I can't get my head around this in terms of, here we are, it's the penultimate weekend of Major League Soccer this past Sunday, and we've talked about this all season long in terms of FS1 having an issue, especially with Sunday night broadcasts or Sunday night afternoon broadcasts any time. It just, for whatever reason, even when NFL and college football, even when the NFL's not on, the numbers have been disappointing. And this past Sunday, we had Minnesota against LAFC, which I watched some of that game. It was good, and that was on FS1. That one had 84,000 viewers tuning into that one. And then we had the New York Red Bulls against DC United. More on the line in this game in terms of being even more important in terms of trying to get the seeding and as high a seed as possible for these two teams. And this one, New York Red Bulls against DC United on FS1, from 5:30 to 7:30 Eastern Time, 79,000 viewers for this one. What's your take on this, Kartik? Is this simply a NFL issue? Is this a FS1 issue? Is this a Major League Soccer issue? What would be your perspective?
There are not many MLS fans outside fans of clubs that go to get matches. We've determined that based on television ratings for a number of years. The simultaneous kickoffs to final match days, which I agree with from a competitive standpoint, and I applaud MLS for doing this, because this was something I couldn't get done at the NASL, even though we marketed ourselves as being more connected to the real spirit of the sport than MLS was. They've done this. It's a tradition throughout the world. final match days of seasons, so that just think about the fixing of results and things like that. So I applaud MLS for doing this, but I think it means the people who would watch a national broadcast are largely watching either a local broadcast of their favorite team playing away from home, or they're at a match. So that just kills the rating, and I don't think NFL has. Look, we got a lot of blowback on the article I wrote last week about the NFL, and I am not saying that is not a factor, that American sports casual fans, and that is not a factor. Some people misunderstood it. I am saying that there are multiple factors, and one of the biggest factors is core football fans being burnt out during the day. Mm-hmm. So that is one factor here again. But then another factor is the people who actually do watch MLS broadcasts, the bigger factor than NFL or burnout in these two particular numbers. In addition to it being on FS1, which is getting lower ratings in general than ESPN, is the simultaneous kickoffs.
I would add to that, though, Kartik, another factor, which is that most Major League Soccer fans or fans of a Major League Soccer club will watch their club but have no interest in all the other games in that league. So if you have a Portland Timbers fan who either goes to or watches Portland Timbers games, he or she may have very little interest in watching, I don't know, New York Red Bulls or LAFC or whatever, all the other teams as opposed to, say, the Bundesliga or the Premier League or Liga Max, where those hardcore fans will try to consume as much of those leagues as possible. We'll look at the competition, we'll look at the opponents in those other games, and we'll have a better understanding or appreciation for how that league operates and which teams are doing well and which ones aren't, in addition to the team that he or she supports. And I think that's a big factor in numbers, because if you only are interested in the club that you support, home games are fine. You may go to your home game if you're a Timbers fan, as an example. And for those away games, you might watch the Timbers play on television away against whoever it is on television. But if you have no interest in any of the other teams in the rest of the league, and you multiply that by every single Major League Soccer team, that's bad news. And it's a different audience. We've talked about this a couple of podcasts ago. The audience for soccer fans, hardcore fans, are different than, I guess there are hardcore MLS fans, but it's a much, much smaller percentage. And I think if you're a fan of the Bundesliga, Serie A, whatever it may be, if you're a fan of an overseas league, you're probably going to be more of a hardcore fan because you've been more committed, having to jump through so many hoops just to watch your team or your league in previous decades, that you're more committed. Just my take on that. All right, Kartik, let's move on to the listener mailbag. First one up is Coolio 2 Foots. And Coolio 2 Foots says, in regards to the score box being shown, and this is for the Bundesliga or the Premier League, am I the only person who doesn't like it? I don't like that I'm watching a match and they spoil the score of another match, which I plan to watch later. If I want to know the score of another match, I will look it up. In regards to watching Liverpool and Man City, I don't know about anyone else, but for me, I find it a joy watching these teams play. I enjoy it because they are playing beautiful football. It's a model of how good a team can be if everyone is on the same page and organised. And 2 points here. I mean, the first point in terms of the score bug, I think we're past that. It's one of those things that I understand where you're coming from, but say 5 years ago, people were freaking out. Any tickers and anything that had scores of other games. Our viewing habits have changed. Our viewing habits, say from 5 years and previously, would have been that we would have watched one game live, taped all the other games on DVR or VCR, and then have gone back to watch those as if they were live, hoping that we didn't know the scores. Hoping that we wouldn't find out what the score was. That's changed. I think now we're in very much a very minute-by-minute lifestyle viewing habits, and it's very difficult to avoid scores of other games, even if we try to as best as we can. And then the thing about Liverpool Man City, I appreciate in terms of the playing styles and just the level that they're at. It's just more so week in, week out, getting a bit bored by just winning every single game. And yes, it's great to see that happen in terms of the playing level, but it becomes, for the neutral, it becomes, at least for me, a little bit predictable. Craig Shapiro says, NBCSN has rarely stepped wrong in their coverage of the EPL, so they've got a lot of rope with me. Still, they're obsessing about Pulisic was nauseating in the early days of the season. The attraction of the EPL is and always will be about its clubs, not a cult of personality. And Kartik, we've got some good news too. This weekend, this Sunday morning, is the first time that NBCSN has been given an opportunity to broadcast a Chelsea game, but has decided not to. So they're having Chelsea's game is, I think, against... Oh, actually, I can't remember who it's against, but it's going to be on NBC Sports Gold on Sunday morning, and then instead they will be showing on NBCSN Manchester City against Wolves. So I think NBCSN has got the message. And I think it's time to move on. And if Pulisic, makes his way back into the squad and into the team and starts playing well, maybe there's an opportunity down the road for people to catch him in those games. But it's been a long journey, and we're what 7 games into the season. This is going to be a long season. Thankfully, NBCSN is responding to people, and I think picking up. The best game to put on in that time slot.
But is that the best game? I mean, Manchester City matches generally aren't competitive. That's
Wolves, though.
The question. And I mean, Chelsea, there were compelling storylines of all the young players. Now, of course, they haven't played up the Mason Mounts and Tammy Abrahams and Tomori's, and now Reece James making a start in the Champions League. They haven't played that up at all on NBC. It's been about Pulisic. So maybe they're missing the actual storyline with what Frank Lampard's doing at Chelsea. But we'll see. Maybe they'll shift even in how they cover Chelsea now, realizing you have 3 or 4 academy guys, academy products who've been loaned out to the championship, have improved their play, starting for a top 4 aspirant in the Premier League week in and week out. I think that's a huge story for English football that NBC and a lot of people on Twitter have missed because they've become obsessed with Pulisic. Mm-hmm.
I would agree with you there, but I would say that in terms of Sunday morning's lineup, Man City against Wolves. I mean, Wolves to me is still a well-organized team, and that's a team that I have a lot of time and patience for. I love to watch them play, and they could give Man City a bit of a run for their money. But the Chelsea game it's against Southampton.
Oh yeah.
So maybe it's more about Southampton than it is about Chelsea and the decision not to show it on television. But then the Arsenal against Bournemouth game, which happens at the same exact time at 9:00 Eastern on Sunday, that one is on CNBC. So they could have put Southampton against Chelsea at that one, but they didn't. Hopefully, from NBC's perspective, hopefully it's like, hey, all right, we've kind of basically tried to run this thing into the ground, and it's not working, and he's not playing. It's kind of a strange situation. Something
that's very interesting. Digressing here, is the number of Sunday matches NBC is moving to CNBC versus Saturday matches. Traditionally, it was Saturday 3 p.m. kickoffs or 10 a.m. kickoffs on the East Coast. That they were putting a second game from the SN game to CNBC. Now we're seeing European weeks where Europa League teams, particularly Arsenal and Manchester United, are bumped to, and Wolves also bumped to Sundays. Those are the matches that they're putting on CNBC. So that's an interesting tactical shift from NBC. I actually quite like it because Sundays have been tough in the past, European weeks, because the better games in the league tend to all fall to Sundays because of that. Because of the European calendar.
I think it's 2 things though. One is TV ratings. So they're looking at the Saturday 10 a.m. Eastern game and saying, okay, if we have just one of those games on television, that won't split the audience. That will have most of the audience gravitate to that one match. Which will help our viewing figures for every weekend and for the whole entire year. But then the second thing, too, is also trying to push more people to subscribe to NBC Sports Gold and, basically have them kind of a carrot at the end of the stick and then wave that a few times and hope that they sign up for that. But moving on, Kartik, next up is John Average Geek. He has 2 comments, and he says, in regards to Major League Soccer in the Sunday broadcast, John Average Geek says, just kick off the game. The pre-game is worthless. The on-field interviews are worthless. The sideline reporters are worthless. When a game is advertised to start at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, how about starting it at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, not 5:30 Eastern Time? And then the second point he has is, I get the whole American voice thing that Fox wants in its MLS coverage, but it does not give. But if it doesn't give any knowledge, what's the point? Break down the tactics and ball movement. And yes, I mean, they're very much. I mean, going back to what you said before too, Kartik, about storytellers, ESPN are experts at storytelling. So I have no doubt that ESPN will do a fantastic job in terms of the storytelling. We'll be punching up those Bundesliga stories as much as possible. And Fox's style is different, not as good. I mean, they're more about stats. They're more about kind of talking in many ways and not giving a lot of tactical insight and knowledge. And it's a different style. And NBC has a different style too. And as we've seen with Fox's numbers for the Major League Soccer, they're not working. And there's got to be a reason why. Maybe that's one of the main reasons that people are just really tired and just don't like Fox's style. Raymond Orozco says, I don't really like watching English commentators during Champions League because the last time they played Spurs against Bayern Munich, the English commentators named off all of the historical Spurs players, but none of the great players from Munich. And I get that totally in terms of, and sometimes it is one of those things where the commentators actually might be English commentators, so they're more biased or more knowledgeable about the English footballers as opposed to the Bayern or German footballers. And they might do that subconsciously without even realizing it, especially for a global audience. But it should be more 50-50, where it's more unbiased. Robert Thompson says, Solskjaer and Unai Emery have been blamed for their teams having such a bad start to the season. So, Kartik, this is for you. So why does Pochettino get a free ride?
He shouldn't get a free ride, but he certainly deserves less criticism because the last 4 seasons Spurs have overachieved. They've finished in the top 4. They are a club who has very strict spending limits compared to Arsenal and Manchester United. They have a situation where not only do they spend less in the transfer market, they spend far less on weekly wages than those two clubs. The sort of wages that Mesut Ozil, who doesn't make the 18 for Arsenal, are paid are impossible to even fathom for Spurs. They would never pay a player half that much per week. So there are a lot of limitations that I think we get fooled by transfer spending in the market, not looking at weekly wages. The reality remains Manchester City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, and Arsenal can pay far more in weekly wages to the players on their books than Spurs can. Plus, Spurs have, I believe, limitations based on the new stadium that, of course, they've publicly said this makes them a much more viable entity in terms of spending, but I think it's probably more similar to the way, particularly with the overruns in terms of costs and at time it took to build that stadium, much more like the Emirates or Arsenal right after they moved from Highbury to the Emirates, that there was limited spending by Arsenal standards for the next few years. So I think, yeah, Pochettino does deserve some blame because there is something going wrong in the dressing room and things turn stale after a while. They've overachieved each of the last 4 seasons. They finished oftentimes ahead of Chelsea or Manchester United or in fact, at one point, they finished ahead of all 5 of the other big 6 teams: City, Liverpool several seasons they finished ahead of United, Arsenal, and Chelsea under Pochettino. He's finished ahead of all those teams at least in one season. But there's something wrong in that dressing room. I agree, Robert. Maybe he deserves some blame because he can't manage whatever has gone wrong in the dressing room over the summer and into the start of the new season. But I do not think Pochettino can be judged by the same standard as managers at those at 4 of those other 5. I think Lampard's in a unique situation because of the transfer ban, but you cannot apply the same standard to judge Pochettino as you do Guardiola, Klopp, Solskjaer, or Emery. It's just not. It's apples and oranges, really.
Yeah, my thinking on this, Kartik, is that the expectations are different. So the expectations at Manchester United and Arsenal are greater. These are historic clubs that have won recently. Spurs have not won a trophy recently, so the expectations are lower. Even within the press, I think the press probably would be, again, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, but probably giving Spurs a little bit more of a free ride in quotation marks, because the expectations aren't as great as they are at these other clubs. Last but not least, Vincent Orozco shares some thoughts on watching Liga MX on FS2 in English language. And Vincent says, I was watching the Monterrey derby on FS2, and in my opinion, Kobe Jones has a color commentary style that's pretty hard to listen to. It's obvious that he doesn't watch Liga MX in the way that he watches MLS and LA Galaxy. He brought no in-depth coverage of the game, and in my opinion, Fox blew a big opportunity. And those are the games oftentimes too that fly under the radar. A lot of people not realizing that Fox, FS1 and FS2 on late Saturday nights oftentimes will have English language commentary of select Liga MX games. So we want you to have your say. You can always reach us via email through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can post your comments on worldsoccertalk.com. The types of questions and feedback and opinions that we're looking for are mostly in terms of soccer production on the television side, or questions about streaming, or just kind of some of your observations in terms of how this beautiful game is televised or streamed from around the world. We'd love to hear from you. So, Kartik, before we close, where can listeners reach out to you, or kind of find out your latest rants and raves on social media?
KKFLA737 is the easiest place.
Awesome.
On Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. You can get a new episode of the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday. Every episode is released on SoundCloud, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Audioboom, Overcast, and worldsoccertalk.com. If you like the show, share it with your friends on social media and give us a review on iTunes. And Kartik, heading into another busy weekend, which is going to be the final day of the regular season in Major League Soccer, as well as some big games from around Europe and around the world. What should they do?
Enjoy your football.